And the mayor didn't think he might make it.
Yeah, he was gonna bag out.
All right.
The wimp was sleeping in, I guess.
Yeah. Should call him.
All right.
All right, we can go ahead and get the land use committee meeting started. 7:30. And that's on?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you have a packet?
No, I do not.
Well, we can. So the first agenda item is update the parks comprehensive plan.
All right, and so this is an item that came up at the council retreat, and I was asked to look into what the potential cost of doing a parks plan update, and we requested some contracts from Gig Harbor, Pierce County, I forget what the third jurisdiction was that we reviewed, maybe not Hallsbow, Bainbridge, or
I don't remember anymore.
yeah, anyway, we got 3 examples of a scope of work and a fee for the update, and it seems to me that we're probably looking in the ballpark of $40,000 to do a parks plan update if we hire it.
Sure, that'd be great. Thank you.
If we hire the parks plan to be done. Pierce County spent $100,000, but obviously their system is much bigger than what Gig Harbor has. I think Gig Harbor was at $45,000 to $50,000, but perhaps theirs was a little bit more elaborate than what needed. And then somebody else just did a minor update in the $10,000 to $20,000 range. And, so really, it's a question of, is this something that we want to prioritize or add to the work plan for the department as a mid-year budget amendment, or yeah, I think Alan has to do the budget amendment and start it in September before he retires, but is that something that we would want to include in that? I'm not dying to do a parks plan update, but it will make us eligible for the next round of RCO funding if we want to go after grants.
So what's the deadline then for that and adopting a new
So
plan?
the application cycle, we just had one in February, and it's every 2 years in February. So presumably the fall of 18, we would need to have something adopted and send it to RCO to be certified to establish that eligibility.
And how long are they thinking this would take? Or how long do you think this would take?
I'd say 6 to 9 months. I don't think it's not a huge amount of effort. I think it's a limited amount of public outreach. I think really where we need to spend some time is updating the parks impact fee. We haven't reviewed it since 2011. The methodology that was used then, I think it needs to be reviewed, and it was done in-house at that time, and I'm not 100% comfortable with how it was used. I'm certain of how we're spending it, and then we're certainly with the McCormick Park project, we're able to justify a parks impact fee.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of adding additional capacity, what are our future needs in areas of the city that aren't developed, and how does that relate to a traffic impact fee or relate to a condition of development going forward? Do we want to establish standard levels of service that developments of a certain size include parks, or are we going to look at planning city parks in areas like the Blueberry Ramsey neighborhood that is just breaking ground, or I know we have Lundberg Park, which is undeveloped, and do we want to put money into that, and is impact fees the right way to pay for that? But we really don't have any programming for what that park is going to look like.
How deficient is our current park comprehensive plan? And could we do a minor, something that would be less than the 40,000?
We could. I think it really depends on whether you want to look at adding new facilities or whether you just want to refresh what we have and redo the impact fee calculation. I think we do need to program Lundberg Park and Paul Powers Park. I know those 2 things have been kicked around for years without a whole lot of resolution.
What about the other park across from Fred Meyer?
Did we adopt that as a park? I can't remember.
I
know
think
we talked
did.
about
Did
it.
we take it out? It was in there. Did we take it out?
I know the mayor the old mayor filed a comp plan amendment to make it a dog park, and I don't think that was approved.
No.
And I don't know if it's still in there as a park or not, but I think there's certainly a need for a park in that part of the city, although whether that's the best location or not, I think is up for debate. I know Mark wants it as an equipment yard for keeping snowplows on that side of the city and other equipment.
So if we wanted to submit a plan to the state, it'd have to be ready by February of 2018.
Correct.
And if it's
Well, it has,
six-
No.
it has to be submitted before that, because that's when the applications for
Febu-
grants.
The applications for the grants are going to be February of 2019, so it needs to be done by the end of 2018,
Oh.
probably
End of
October,
2018,
November
Okay.
ballpark.
It's got to be submitted in time for them to approve.
So it is.
and
It
we
needs
can
to be
apply.
done during the not necessarily 17, but we need to start it certainly by January of 18 if we're going to adopt an updated parks plan.
Nick, you mentioned that there wouldn't be a whole lot of public involvement. What kind of, at a high level, what do you envision the scope for that project to include? You mentioned look at Lundberg and those sorts of things, but
I think it really depends on whether we want to go through the process of identifying the improvements to be built at those various facilities. Right now, we don't have any cohesive plan for Lundberg. Paul Powers, we've drawn some things up, and so we probably want to just add those to the parks plan and provide capital estimates of costs. But I think the public outreach is, number one, identifying what specific improvements you want at specific parks. Two, identifying where we don't have parks that we maybe need parks. And then also identifying levels of service for figuring out what facilities we have and don't have and potentially need to try to add to our park system. And so that could be a combination of surveys, or I think if you're talking about specific parks, it's probably having a workshop of some sort to get that input. I think the impact fee calculation is sort of the last step, but it's similar to our gap analysis or some other financial type study where I think those things are generally less than $10,000 for somebody to do the analysis and prepare the report and give you a basis for updating or adopting or confirming your existing fee.
What would be the possibility of having that University of Washington group come over?
We could certainly, I could
don't
certainly
remember
reach
what
out.
that cost, but they did a nice
did a
public
nice job.
outreach, and they did a nice finished product.
I can certainly reach out. I think they have, at least if it's the same as when I was in school there, they have a winter and spring studio. So that starts in January and ends in June. And that's the first year master's students, but then they also have smaller studios that are more focused on specific projects, which are like 8-person classes or 12-person classes rather than the bigger group that we had. But I could reach out and see if there's an opportunity for that. I don't know on the financial portion, I don't know whether we want to have students do an impact fee calculation or preparing estimates
Yeah.
for capital improvement.
But it's the outreach
Right.
that takes.
they
Yeah.
did a nice job.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then would result in a plan. I think I'm hearing that we could probably update ourselves moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah, it's also possible that talking to some of the professors, there may be like a combined landscape architecture and planning student type studio where you would have some designers as well as planners that would help facilitate meetings, and you would get the, I don't know, maybe a little bit different perspective on things by including designers in the program.
Well, fortunately, we have enough time to look at the different options, but personally, I think we should plan on moving forward with an update in some form or another, so that we can continue to compete for funding.
Yeah.
We're much more competitive for grants if we have a good plan.
Yeah, so I can certainly reach out to the university. I think our last, when we did the comprehensive plan, I think it was about $15,000
What I was
that we
thinking.
paid to cover the professors' costs and whatnot for the studio. If we still needed to have the financial part of it sent out to a consultant, you're looking in the ballpark of what it would cost probably to have a consultant do this, but I can certainly ask the question of the university and see if they have interest and go from there. Otherwise, I think the step would be do a consultant selection, develop a scope, and once we have a dollar amount, it would be a budget amendment, and we I guess take it to finance committee get a recommendation on funding.
Okay.
All right, so I will reach out to UW and report back next month.
All right. All right. Sign code. Ooh.
All right, so we
Taking all the
actually,
controversy out of it. The committee solved all the problems.
you know, I will say, that, so we met with the committee, we had our last meeting and disbanded the committee because they voted to recommend the sign code. There's 5 minor things that we're addressing that came out of yesterday's meeting that are part of their recommendation, but we're working to clean that up with the attorney. I'll say that it's probably the best advisory committee I've worked with. The group that you assembled, Mayor, was really, I think, very cooperative and provided good input. So it was great to work with those folks. Again, the purpose of the sign code was to come up with a content-neutral way of regulating signage. And so that's been a real challenge, I think, especially with certain types of signs where if you want, for instance, to allow temporary signs in residential neighborhoods, you're also allowing commercial signage. So it's political signs, it's for sale signs, it's signs for somebody advertising their business or any number of things. And so we really struggled with balancing, allowing for some speech without allowing for so much speech that things could really get out of control. And I think that we're at a place where, there may be a few bad actors here and there that are going to want to put up a bunch of signs, but generally, I think things will be fairly balanced in terms of the quantity of signage. I will say I think the most controversial issue out of the sign committee is they had a very strong preference to allow for what are they called?
Feather signs?
Feather signs. Those are the big
The banners. Oh,
heavy
the
base
banners.
with a banner that comes up. It's about 12 feet tall and they flap in the wind. They want to allow them every 10 feet along a street frontage if somebody wants to do that. And I said, well, we didn't propose that as part of our initial thing, but that can certainly be the recommendation of the committee, and we'll take it forward as such. And it's possible to get stripped out of there.
They're currently prohibited.
They're allowed, but right now we're not content neutral, and so we allow for certain portable and temporary signs. It has to be on your property, but the area of signage is limited so much that you can only have 1 or 2 at the most. This is certainly allowing a lot more than that. And
I heard from the realtors too about I know a realtor sign in particular, like it's the commercial realtor that puts the 4x8 sign up. Those properties, sit for sale for a long time, and we have a sunset clause in this, I think of 12 months.
I was looking for that.
But Mike said he saw it, and I haven't
I think
found
he was
it.
looking at our old sign code. He provided comments last night on the Unified Development Code, and his comments on signage were about the signage that was from our old code that was just being renumbered. I don't think he commented on this.
Okay.
So I need to try to figure out what he was commenting on, but
You want to
for-
reach out to him directly?
Yeah, absolutely. And for real estate signs, if you're doing 2 4x4 posts and a sheet of plywood, that's actually a permanent sign that you have to get a sign permit for. It's the temporary signs that are somewhat limited, but they're only limited by how many and how much area you can have on an
So
individual
a
property.
4x8 sign, let's say a political sign, I've got, and it's corrugated.
Yeah, I think I think the building code regulates signs of that nature. I think it has to do with wind loads and other things.
I was just told I'm liable if it comes off the post.
Yeah, although temporary sign in here is defined based on the material that it's made out of, so I think there's a difference if it's wood versus corrugated. I think the corrugated may be temporary, but the wood, if you do something
Corrugated what?
plastic.
It's plastic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they use that a lot for printing temporary signs. So the definition in the back of the code here, we had a long conversation about temporary signs. And, talks about posters, banners, placards, stake signs. Let's see. They may only be made out of non-durable materials, including but not limited to paper, corrugated board, flexible, bendable, or foldable plastics, foam core board. And so once you get to the point where you've built something that's going to last for, a year or more, you're getting into the permanent signage realm. And so if it was wood or something more substantial than a corrugated
I know,
plastic.
like Martin, what's his last name? Like first name. Anyway, they're at Tremont Pottery.
Yeah,
That sign is made out of. I think he makes his
TJ.
Metal.
TJ. It's made out of metal.
yeah, that would require a sign permit.
Yeah,
And it's
it's a
But it's
nice.
been there for
It's a
2
nice
years.
sign.
it's a nice sign. Property is sold, so it's had a sold slapped across
Yeah.
it and set for
It's advertising for
Yeah.
a
him.
couple months. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't regulate content, so if it's sold or not sold, we're not.
Yeah, but
there
it's
to
it's
judge.
the material and whether or not it's structurally sound, I guess.
Yep.
Those comments that Michael Eliason sent, I bet he can, because we're looking at, we have public review comment out for both, for Title 20 and the signs. So I bet he looked at the old version of signs in Title 20
Exactly.
and didn't look at the new version. So
Yeah.
I think that's what happened.
Okay. So if you could respond to him and just send him this sign code with that comment.
Yeah.
I believe you're looking at the old code.
Yeah. So the other thing that I think is a difficulty for us, especially right now because we only have one commercial zone, is that freestanding signs for places like Walmart and Fred Meyer, which typically want signs taller than just your ground sign, right now we allow 4 different types of freestanding signs, but none of them are taller than 10 feet, or is it 12 feet on that?
They're just monument signs?
Monument signs, we have a pole and mast arm sign, which is like where you have something hanging down.
Right.
So we've defined 4 different types of freestanding signs, but all of them have different height limits, and the biggest is 10 feet.
12 maybe.
Yeah, it's hard to, I think Fred Meyer and the sign even in front of Walmart, I think, is probably at least 15 or 20 feet.
The one at the bank's 35.
Yeah, so
Columbia Bank.
the committee didn't have a problem with that,
That one's not.
but I can certainly see that some people are going to want to have signs like that. I think Bruce Titus is going to want to have a sign bigger than that, certainly. And so right now, we don't have a way to do that. The way that I would envision doing that would be is once we create like a automotive tourist or automotive highway commercial zone that's different from a regular commercial zone, we could allow additional height only where that zoning applies, and that way you're still content neutral, but you do allow taller pole signs in certain areas of the city. And that could be one component of figuring out where your storage units go, where your car dealerships go, where certain uses are where you would want to allow additional signage. But I think
those businesses in Bravo Terrace, they're not advertising to the people in Bravo Terrace. That sign height is trying to catch the person driving down the freeway
16.
to stop for McDonald's or the gas station,
Yeah.
or here's an ATM.
And we heard that issue when they put in Dairy Queen, that specifically came in and asked for some exemptions to be.
yeah.
So is there a variance
Well,
process?
There is.
Well, there's a variance process, but I don't know that you're going to meet the criteria if you just want a taller sign.
One of the criteria is it can't be self-imposed. And it's exactly what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so giving that additional height, we would either need to, we could create areas of the city where we would actually insert a map in here that says freestanding pole signs may be taller in these areas. But
that-
Yeah,
Is
and I don't know if I don't sidebar. I don't know if pole signs are necessarily the answer,
yeah.
but
Anyway, so I think that potentially has that may be a touchy subject once we get comments from the broader community beyond the advisory committee. I mean, the Chamber of Commerce was represented in the advisory committee and they didn't raise this as an issue. And I think if you're talking about Bethel between, Lund and downtown, ground signs are perfectly acceptable for that landscape. I think along Tremont, ground signs are the most that you would want, but once you're out on Sedgwick, maybe it's a different story.
Or abutting the freeway.
Right, I was thinking even Bethel from Lund to Sedgwick, is that what you said?
He
From
said-
Lund to Sedgwick, potentially, I mean,
But Lund to downtown, you wouldn't need.
No, and I'm not, again, just thinking of the corridor. I don't know that Fred Meyer needs a tall sign, and again, I'm not sure that Walmart does either. But I can truly see the need along Highway 16 if they're trying to pull, or even Mile Hill.
That's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
It really
Yeah.
is. I've had experience with Reliable Storage and how
Okay.
they felt
Out
like
there on
the
6th,
the
yeah.
bigger letters they could get, because they're further back.
Right.
And they really wanted to go with some super tall letters to try to get the highway traffic. Well,
Yeah.
that's, if you're that far off the highway, should you be entitled to try and reach out?
Yeah.
Do you need a sign out on the freeway?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and our other requirement is that, in terms of illumination, those things, we certainly don't want them lit while the
Right.
business is closed because it's lighting up the night sky. I mean, I'm not a fan of allowing a lot of pole signs, but I can certainly understand the desire in certain parts of the city to allow it on a limited basis. But, I think this is a decision point in terms of what do we want our community to look like long term. And once these things are in, they're going to be there for a long time.
Right, and maybe you could look at a scalable, so if you're within this distance on a highway, you wouldn't necessarily need something versus the outer limit of your distance, where you maybe want it taller.
Having managed a business that had one of these signs, it's a maintenance nightmare. I mean, I've got to have a bucket truck come in to wash it, to change the bulbs, and now, things are LED and the bulbs don't go out, but for years, I mean, we had fluorescent tubes in there, and the guy it was expensive. He was out twice a year, and of course, in their wisdom, they made it white, and white does so well with the wintertime
UV.
around here.
So
At least you maintain
Mildew.
your sign.
The other thing on Bethel, but where we're talking about widening the roadway, I mean, when you have right-of-way take issues, the last thing you want to be doing is buying or replacing somebody's pole sign. And so I would think that we would want to maybe not go there. And I think what we have is probably workable for now because it's not substantially different from our current regulations. But as we update our zoning regulations, we may want to think about certain areas of the city being allowed other signage. So I just saw the potential there for some comments where people may want to ask for more and to alert you to that. Other than that, I think we've done the best that we can in complying with the Supreme Court case on content neutrality.
Is this going to the Planning Commission next?
Goes to Planning Commission in June. I know we've canceled our August works. We're talking about canceling our August work study. So my goal is to have this to council work study no later than July, with possible action at the first meeting in August. I think is a reasonable timeline. We've started a 60-day comment period on this already, which ends at the end of May. And mostly I wanted to provide it to this committee so that you can review it and provide any feedback in advance of it going to council and become a little bit more familiar with it. And
Did you have any, I'm not trying to know all the names here, but any sign company reps on that advisory?
yeah, one of the guys is a sign maker, Jeff White, I
Jeff
believe.
White, okay.
Yeah, I forget the name of his company.
Fine Arts
Fine.
Litho.
Kind of based.
Yeah.
So he definitely had a lot to say, especially about the temporary things, because he does a lot of printing of banners and the feather signs and whatnot. And,
He gave us a lot of help with setting the sign sizes because he knows what the standard sizes are that are available and that people request.
Mhm.
So,
Oh, that's
yeah.
good.
yeah.
Who was Matt Williams? That's the name I'm not familiar with.
That's the guy from the chocolate company.
Yeah.
It's Matt Carter.
That's Matt
All
Carter.
right. Change that.
And then we had Sue Ann Martin from Homemade Cafe.
Yeah,
And she's now a planning commissioner. I meant to note that we need to give her her title.
Okay.
Was
So-
there any discussion on the permit fees, the sign permit fees?
I think there was.
I've had people ask me about that, thinking that it's a bit onerous.
What is the sign fee?
So it depends what type of sign you're talking about. So sometimes you have to get a building permit and a sign permit. Sometimes under this you'll be required to get a sign permit and a right-of-way permit. And so it really depends on which codes govern which signs. I think one of the concerns was that if you want to do an A-board sign and you're required to do a right-of-way use permit and an A-board sign permit, you're looking at more than $100 to get your sign up. But we will need to look at our fee resolution as a result of this because we now have new sign types that we didn't have previously. We may want to make it easier to put up certain temporary and portable type devices, but
Is it because those have to be engineered signs or they need inspections?
The most recent one that was brought to my attention, and it was not by the person who was putting the sign up, it was by an associate of theirs, said that they were just hanging one of those little signs down under the marquee,
I heard about that. Too.
and it was like $125, and they were a little put back on that.
gotcha. Well, and if
That required building permit?
not a building permit, just a sign permit for that. Although if it's a new sign and they're hanging it above the right-of-way, that's a right-of-way use issue because it's in the street right-of-way. If they're just replacing or refacing an existing sign and taking one down and putting it up, there's not a permit required at all because it's just content.
It was a new sign.
It was a
Okay.
new sign.
I didn't know we didn't have.
Dock.
Okay.
The Central Market.
You wouldn't
or dock.
inspect those to see if it load bearing and all those codes?
Not if the hooks are already there. I mean, if it's
No, for new one.
for a new one, we would.
Yeah, okay.
But
We're talking a very small sign though, hanging underneath the marquee.
one of the problems, though, under the marquee, some of those signs are less than 8 feet. The building code requires an 8-foot minimum height clear zone, and we don't have that kind of clearance in most of downtown. And so,
And if it's not done right too, they go up and of course drill a hole in the corrugated metal and
Yeah.
Right.
water comes on that.
yet another marquee issue, though, is most of those signs don't comply with the building code because they're too low and they're supposed to be higher. But
I don't know, 120 seems reasonable, it's an hour.
well, and you're talking about because it's in the right of way. You're having Public Works look at things. You're having the planning department look at things, and potentially the building inspector. So,
We're expensive.
anyway, study this and feel free to email any questions that you have, and let's plan on discussing this again next month and see if we can see if there's any further comments or any changes that you'd like to have us bring up at the planning commission.
So feather signs would be permitted,
Currently, they're in the draft.
and what sort of, I haven't gotten there, what sort of?
He said one every 10
spacing?
feet or something.
Is it one every 10
I think
feet?
you get up to,
Is that not
it's
distracting
page
to
34.
drive it?
Page
I
34.
guess I'm not,
D.
what the heck is a feather sign?
Ford has them
It's
down
so
there.
simple.
They go on a metal base, and you see them. Quadrant does them too, and they're like a feather, and they mount into this base and they flap in the wind.
Yeah, it's
You've
kind
seen
of
them,
and they-
look
so they got-
like that.
Oh, okay, all right.
a. There you go. So you get, the way it's written now is one feather sign per 10 feet of frontage up to a total of 12 signs for all tenants combined on a site. So that's a lot. And
That is a
and
lot.
what
A lot
they
of
said-
feathers.
The interesting thing that happened yesterday as part of their recommendation is they said, well, if we're going to allow 12 feather signs, we're not allowing enough A-board signs. And so they said, we need at least 2 A-board signs per street frontage instead of 1 for single-tenant businesses. And we said, well, the only reason that we have so many feather signs is because you recommended it, not because we were advocating, for more A-boards. So they also then increased the number of A-boards that every business would get out in front of there.
One per business ought to be enough, but
You would think
Is
so.
there anything
One
in here
per, I
about?
agree.
they've got it at 2.
Is there anything in here about those?
Currently, we don't allow
the
A-boards.
Not allowed.
The dancing cigarettes.
Tube
Yeah,
signs.
under
Yeah.
prohibited
Yeah.
signs, anything that moves, with the exception of flags, is not allowed. So if it's flags and then the feather signs. So those are the only
Right.
2 things that can actually have movement as part of the sign.
So the sign that's mounted by Amy's, that one that rotates, those would be prohibited?
Yes.
Oh, that's grandfathered.
Yeah, no, that one would be,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and it's only grandfathered if it was permitted. If
To
it's,
begin with, right.
Yeah, it would have had to have been permitted to begin
I
with.
doubt Joe permitted it.
So how would that, are you
Oh,
talking
did
about
Joe put that
the?
up? There's no permit.
Yeah, no. Be interesting to find out where he got that sign, but those are prohibited because they move, they
Yeah.
rotate to change the sign.
Yeah, there's a
How
mechanical.
would that be different than, the video signs that have no moving parts, but the sign changes?
Well, video signs, we have specific regulations for how and I think what do we call them, message center signs or
Yeah.
something? And so I believe it talks about, I haven't looked at that provision for a while. I think it talks about fixed messages and how long each message has to display, and that you're not having animation in the sign, you're just displaying the
changing.
information.
I've seen them in car lots where they, well, you pretty big one along Highway 3, but, you know, car lots oftentimes will have a
Titus has one.
Electronic
fairly
message
good-sized video
center.
that will change periodically.
Yeah, it
It's
says.
very distracting driving up I-5 and 5.
Oh, yeah, those big
Especially at night.
billboards are.
Yeah.
I find myself
Oh,
watching
they-
TV.
yeah.
Those are all mounted
Yeah, no
on
mo-
sovereign nation, though.
No motion except for a fade in of the next message, with the fade and transition being no more than 1.5 seconds.
So, i.e., no scrolling.
Yeah. So the other part of this too is that, you know, Walgreens and a lot of these people, they are controlling those signs by internet from corporate, and so this requires that they can be controlled and programmed locally, so that if there's a problem, the manager at the store can address the problem without it having to be part of, you know, a national corporate type fight.
What's the time for those? How long do they need to stay stagnant?
1.5.
10 seconds with 1.5 second transition.
So, you know, again, how would that differ from the spinning things that are on Amy's?
I don't find that sign to
We're,
be
yeah,
all that offensive.
I think the idea is that we're trying to make this as safe as possible and as
Well, I
limiting
appreciate
the
that,
distraction.
but I could hear the argument of, why can't I have this one, because this one doesn't change any more frequent than
It's
the
it's a
video.
thin profile sign that looks, it appears to be anyway, probably
Yeah.
thinner than the electronic signs.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, you can certainly
I'm just-
change it.
The consistency aspect of it, if it's good for one,
Mhm.
how does the other differ? Other one's mechanical, one's electronic.
Right, and perhaps the reality is we'll never see one of those again.
Yeah, you're probably right, but
Mhm.
But that one jumped out at me in terms of the mechanical prohibitions.
Yeah.
I haven't noticed that one moving lately. It's all on Amy's
Doesn't-
now.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Oh, I
Probably
thought,
broke.
a couple months ago. I thought
Probably,
I
but
saw
at least it
but-
broke
Oh,
with
okay.
Amy's and an
Yeah,
arrow.
it
Depends
it
if
going
it
still
down.
tripped
has-
tripped the breaker or
Yeah,
not,
because
or
it still had the
fishing.
outfittings.
Yeah.
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 I'm not familiar with the sign, so I'm
Yeah,
I'm
maybe
having
it
a hard time
finally
with this
stopped
one. So anyway, I mean, if you wanted to set another exception for a certain type of sign, you can certainly add it to this. I think the goal, though, is, you know, there's things that haven't been invented yet, and if it moves, we probably want to prohibit it, and except where we specifically allow certain things. And if we decide that electronic message center signs are okay, and that the feather signs are okay, then let's have some standards for those and
Yeah.
incorporate them into the
I
code.
agree.
Are we okay with one every 10 feet, maximum
not.
12?
I'm not, but I mean, that's not what I would do, but that was the committee's recommendation, so I would assume the planning
He's
commission
playing
is gonna-
Switzerland.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right.
so,
What would be a more reasonable recommendation? Because I too am not comfortable with one every 10 feet.
2 or 3 on a
2 per business, maybe, I mean.
Yeah.
one on the A boards and 2 on the flag sign, feather signs.
yeah.
I think Homemade Cafe at their parking lot, they have 2 of them up there, and so that,
Mhm.
you know, she's on the committee, and that was one of the things, she says, these are really effective. But I think there was talk of, you know, the Ford dealer has a ton of frontage, and how many signs should
Right,
they be allowed?
That's the thing I'm
to
trying to
have?
think, is
Yeah.
just visually how,
Yeah.
if Titus moves around all the way up to the motel, that's a lot of street frontage for
2.
3 or 2.
Yeah,
or-
so maybe it's a calculation on your frontage,
Mhm.
front footage, you know,
Yeah,
so
maybe it's
many.
1 per 50 feet,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be,
up to a maximum, but what is that maximum?
Okay, now just a second, now that you said that, I'm thinking, 50 feet, my lot, I think is, what, 40 feet? Or
For your
50
house?
feet?
Yeah, probably
Yeah.
50 feet.
So I would be able to have,
1.
Well, and we would only allow this commercially, I don't.
no, but that's how I can think in
Yeah.
terms of size.
If it's
And
one
we were
every-
allowing 1 every 10? Oh my God, no.
Well,
You know,
up to
it-
12, yeah.
Up to 12,
Visually, it'd be dominating
Yes.
for
yeah, yeah.
tight lots.
but I would think, using your lot as an example, that they would, max would be 1 on each corner.
Corner.
Right.
So, you know, 1 every 50 feet, does that mean you get the first and then 50 feet later you get the second one? Is that how that would be?
So maybe if it's a minimum, you get 2. and it's one.
I wouldn't go minimum, I would just say 1 every 50 feet with a maximum of,
But in Beck's example, 40 feet though gets one, and you would, if you wanted to have one on each corner.
Could you prepare a couple alternatives?
Yeah, certainly.
Okay. I think you probably sense the flavor of.
Well, I knew it was going to be controversial, which is why I mentioned it first. I think that's, that was the one thing that was recommended that.
so the current Ford garage has 3 drives
Mhm.
to get in there, one's kind of shared with the, that will stand there, so I don't know if they want one on each drive.
I think they're going to be eliminating one of the driveways as
So
one of the new.
I'm just
Yeah.
visualizing what's there
Right.
today.
The planning commission may have some ideas too when they
Yeah.
see this.
Yeah. So give them some alternatives and point
Yep.
these out to them.
Will do. All right, any other questions? This is mostly a homework assignment.
Good work.
Yeah.
So real quick, the last 2 issues I think we pretty much tackled last night. The one thing I wanted to talk about today is in May, we're taking the legislative map amendment to the Planning Commission for where that McCormick Woods R8 zone would apply. And so I provided a map showing those areas, which are parcel D and parcel E of McCormick Woods. And none of those lots front onto St. Andrews Drive, and so it's really, I think, where that is actually going to apply as a self-contained community where, of course, nobody currently lives, and so presumably there's nobody to object to that change because they're going to be buying into it, how it's constructed. And then the residential design standards, I put that on there in case we wanted to talk about it, but it sounds like we're going to get some additional feedback from each of you independently from this meeting, so unless there's something that you want to bring up.
I have 2 questions from last night's meeting. And the first question involves the derelict building or the dangerous building piece. And it wasn't the information he brought forward. It was when he was talking about the building up at, in the Albertsons complex.
Yeah.
It has problems. My question is, how did we find out about that? Do we inspect buildings? Or
We-
did we have complaints?
Health department does.
How did we know?
I don't know for sure, but I think that, I know tenants will call the city and say, can you make my landlord do something? And so that happens periodically, and then when you get a certificate of occupancy for a change in occupancy, we do go in and do an inspection. So it's possible that somebody applied for a certificate of occupancy and then found out about all kinds of problems and chose not to move in or start a business there. But the specifics of that, I'm not familiar with.
Okay, I was wondering, or if it was fire department or what under, I just.
Health
because-
district's probably the only one that really goes out and actively
Yeah.
But
inspects.
that's assuming that there's a big business in there that has been.
Yeah, or the restaurants.
The restaurant.
yogurt-
Fire
yogurt
does
store.
annual inspections,
Yeah, that's true too.
so.
They could,
Because visually,
looks fine, I
it
know.
looks fine. So my question was, why did we go in?
Why
Yeah,
would you
I-
let your very nice
I was kinda
building
surprised.
Right.
deteriorate and let
Yeah.
water's does bad things.
Yeah.
Leaky roofs are not good in the Northwest.
Yeah. So, anything else?
I got a couple little things. Who's got a good relationship with John Ingley? Pinfeet?
Inslee.
Inslee.
Hensley.
Inslee, sorry.
Like,
I'm just, something that's coming this fall is their lease is coming up
for the.
for the frontage on the right of way. It is
What are we talking about?
Pinfeet.
Okay.
Okay, and that was very controversial when it was done because of the lack of parking next door. We took public right of way and for his
Right.
use. Now he's got a building, part of his building, and one of his outbuildings is on part of it. The tough part to this is we're just like these others. It's been long enough. We haven't had an appraisal done. We're going to have to spend the money on an appraisal. So I guess before we start spending money on appraisal, if somebody that has a good relationship with John could pop in and say, hey,
Problem is John's seldom there anymore.
so Doug, you want to talk
Yeah, I
to
can
Doug?
talk to Doug, but
Pop in and talk to Doug and just kind of get a feel for
Yeah.
what their need is
Yeah.
and what their long-term plans are. If there isn't a need for, that's not a business we want to run out of our community. at all. But we have to do this, go about this the right way.
The, what he leases from us is the property that abuts Harrison.
Correct.
And he's using it for storage.
Some
Do
of
we
it is his
inherit-
park.
And some parking.
It's
And some
it's his angle in parking, and he's. I get where his storage is and his building is.
Right.
Are we as a community being best served by that being his private parking? Should that be public parking, and maybe we should make some improvements there? You know, sidewalk frontage.
Or should we,
Or do we? Is our community best served by him controlling that for his exclusive use?
then he would need to pay for that.
Exactly,
Right.
and we're going to have an appraisal, and
Right.
Yeah, he
what
pays for it currently.
what we've
It's a-
Correct, but it may be,
significantly more, and is it in his best interest to let that be public parking and not pay for all of it?
do we know what his long-term plans are there?
I don't.
He tried to sell the place. In fact, he tried to sell it to us at one point. He's kind of semi-retired. I don't know if Doug is.
And
Doug's
is
been there
Doug
forever.
John's brother, or is Doug someone else?
Doug DeFord is
Okay, I don't know.
one of his employees has been there
Okay.
for.
Never.
Doug and I went to school together.
Okay.
Maybe it needs to be part of whatever our waterfront plan is. I don't know.
So, you know, he would be. I think John would be happy to sell it, but he's not going to give it away.
Yeah, and he wants to sell the business, and we have no
Yeah.
The business has no value to us. The real estate does.
Yeah.
What I will say is when people talk to me about downtown, I always point to Penn Feed, and I point to the roofers, and I point to Kitsap Bank when they say there's no successful businesses downtown, where we do have some very successful businesses downtown.
So I know there's an issue coming up here in
Right.
August, and we need to get out in front of it.
Right.
And
I know.
and whatever we do for is leasing it to somebody, we're gonna have to have an appraisal, and I'm confident that the cost is gonna go up quite a bit. And I just want them to be upfront about it.
John's business, my impression has gone down with, they had the Dells and Tractor Supply Dell.
And he's not selling John Deere's anymore.
Yeah, exactly. John Deere changed their whole sales
Yeah.
Who's
approach, so.
he
But I don't know what-
selling now? What does he got?
It's
on?
cadets,
Cadet,
Club Cadets.
Club Cadets.
Yeah, he's still got the Steel, franchise, which that's
Big.
probably big. I just went down and
Well, and he
What's
also
the
does
steel?
the Honda.
Steel
generators.
chainsaws.
Oh, steel, right.
Steel,
Chainsaw,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I just bought a $500 weed eater last Saturday, so they're good, and they're expensive.
He also does the Honda generators.
The Honda and Honda lawnmowers, Honda generators, yeah.
So, I was gonna point out, I think that use of the right-of-way falls under the street use ordinance that we adopted. And so the lease may need to be in conjunction with that, but I'm reading the code right now because we didn't have this in place last time we did a lease for that.
Okay.
So we should talk to the city attorney about whether we can do a lease outside of the street use permit or whether it goes under the street use permit.
We still have to
Right.
value it and appraise it, I
Right.
believe.
Yeah.
The treasurer will point he pointed out in RCW, we can't, come up with our own math.
Are we still leasing any property to Hydroid?
Yes, a sliver.
Still?
We said, okay, we'll lease you this, we'll sell you this
But not
part,
further
but
expanded.
whatever we need to, if someday we needed a double lane roundabout, so Mark
Okay.
did the map, and so we've got a sliver of it that's a lease. And that's a comparable, actually, probably a better comparable is gonna be Titus's lease.
Well, right over here, too. The lease. We're leasing some of this
And I
the
just-
area between the bank and the 7-Eleven.
But we haven't done it, or appraisal,
No.
or
but
redone
there's-
it,
There's
you know.
a lease there.
yeah, but ones
Is
that
that
we've
ours?
done recently.
Yeah, there's some.
Titus, yeah.
There's some ground there
Titus.
that's ours.
Well, since
Nessa's
we mentioned
building up
Titus, I
there,
have a
we
question
leased some
about
street
that.
for parking for his building.
Is there new
We
layout,
leased
site plan?
Titus along the creek.
potentially create conflicts if that portion that they lease from us isn't re-upped? So, for example, I think I saw that they had parking islands on either end of their couple roads. And are those islands so close to the area that they're leasing that if that's not re-upped, they've got another expense they've got to consider?
Who's this?
He's worried about Titus's
Titus.
improvements being on our leased property, the parking islands in particular. I haven't seen the site plan to answer that.
And I'm not worried about it, but they should go into that eyes open that, you know, you, at least a couple council members express interest in seeing what could be done with that in the future. And maybe it's something that we work out with them.
And I had an epiphany at 5 o'clock this morning about the parade.
Oh, okay.
How are you guys about dress up?
Dress up?
I'm not talking about clown suits. Beck's already shaking her head. I'm working on some white hard hats for our groundbreaking. What if we had, instead of a street sweeper, we had a bobcat and a mini excavator in the parade, and the council had orange vests and white hard hats, public works workers.
Okay, now I have no problem with that, but I am going to have another entry in the parade, and I don't want to be changing clothes.
No, it's hard hat and an orange vest, and we're honoring our public works workers.
A little
Please.
dirt, makeup.
Yeah.
Maybe, a little, we can put some dirt on. If you want a pair of gloves, we might, but I was already working on getting white hard hats for a groundbreaking, and I think we could come up with some orange vests. We might, I don't know how your equipment skills, are you trainable? Maybe we put you in a bobcat versus making you
Dibs
walk.
on Bobcat.
Do you need a CDL?
Not for a bobcat. Not for a bobcat. So John's driving a bobcat, and then Mark's in a mini excavator, and the little kids dig equipment. And I haven't talked to Public Works about this. This is totally
I
out
do
of,
like the
out of left
idea
field.
of the flags. If
Yeah,
we
well,
can
Brandy's
find
checking
some.
on that. If we can find 1,000 flags cheap, we'll.
Now, last year with the balloons, council paid for that. Are we expecting council to pay this year? Are we expecting our council budget to pay for it?
You guys are the policymakers. You tell me what you want.
I guess it would depend upon how much it was.
What the expense is, yeah. So,
And not knowing I'd be comfortable with either way, not knowing the expense, but I can see where you can justify the city doing it.
okay.
Especially if we're doing something like what you're suggesting, because we're not out there promoting the council, we're out there promoting the city.
Correct.
Yeah. And honoring Public Works.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Does that mean that next year then we're going to,
Well, maybe we give away shovels.
I'll have another
instead of
epiphany
flags.
between now and then.
drive the police cars, or
Sure.
I get the motorcycle?
You had the Bobcat.
You got the I just watched John dripping on the parade route last year.
I was chasing after that damn dump truck was
I thought we were going to kill him.
Yeah, I thought so too.
I will do get some more information and report back next Tuesday about that. You know what? I've already got some stuff I'm working on for a groundbreaking. Let's use it for the
Yeah,
parade.
Yeah.
So I dressed up though. Beck was out.
Well, no, I could just see myself having to change clothes, and
Yeah.
and that there's just, you've done it. You've done 2 entries. and-
Yep.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty reasonable. The thing I liked about the shirt concept was that it would be applicable in other arenas, not
Yeah.
just the
Well, I
parade,
was
so
thinking, I would like, but I want to pick out my shirt.
That's what I was thinking, is
Okay,
I'll
I'll
buy
get
the
it.
shirt,
Yeah.
You know
bring
what?
it down, and you put the
shirt.
logo on
I
it.
wouldn't
Yeah.
mind having, whether it's the vests or the shirts because everybody's coming to the Community Service Day, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be nice to be recognizable,
Well,
as
I
a
was-
council member.
So,
I was thinking at the AWC conference
There you go.
that we could wear Port Orchard shirts.
Yeah. And Cindy brought up a very good point, that Port Orchard needs city of over the top of it.
Depending on how you're using it.
Depending on how we're using it. And matter of fact, Jeff, and we're done with the meeting.
Done.